Thank you very much. My name is Matthew Maslanka. My father was David Maslanka, one of the foremost symphonists for the wind band. When my father realized that he probably wasn't going to live to finish his 10th symphony, he asked me to complete it for him. From his death in August of 2017 to March of 2018, I worked on the most difficult project of my life. I think he would have been intensely interested to see how I finished his final symphony. I think he would have been excited to see this day, to see how I met the most complex and emotionally overwhelming challenge I've ever faced, to see how I grew as a person and as a musician. The symphony is about love and loss. It's about my father's love for my mother and her love for me. It's about my love of my parents. Symphony is also about the pain of knowing that death is coming soon. It's about experiencing profound loss and the process of dealing with it. When I arrived in Missoula, Montana, after my father's death, my sister handed me a clipboard that Dad had been working on in bed. I took it and I walked to his studio. I put the clipboard on the edge of his piano. It contained the sketches of the third and fourth movements of the symphony. I went to his desk. On his desk lay the last 2 pages of the symphony that he had worked on. Certain details stood out. His metronome, his pencil, the annotation he made on the score the day my mom died. Dad would often draw in pastels left-handed when he got to a rough patch while writing. Behind his desk was a workbench that held his drawing materials. The notebook was open to Dad's last drawing. Dad has written, "Mother and boy watching the river of time." It's one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. Everything was impossibly overwhelming. I was barely able to function for months. There was a profound need in me to protect Dad's music, to see it blossom in the world. I needed to finish the symphony, and not just because I had promised Dad. I needed to finish the symphony for me. It cried out in me, a child not yet born, desperately needing the life I could give it. My father gave me an astonishing gift and a truly daunting challenge. Dad gave me the tools and handed me the materials to build a mighty work. He opened the door of incredible possibility and gave me the kick in the ass I needed to go through it. He hoped that I would grow into the fullness of my power as a creative person, that I would live truly freely. It was time to get to work. First, some background on Dad's composing process. Every new piece started with a meditation. He wrote, "Walking has been extremely important in my concentration practice. Walking engages the whole body and both halves of the brain. It is an integral part of my composing process." When the mind is open, it is possible to ask a question or make a request, such as, "Show me something I need to know about the person who asked me to compose this piece," or "Show me something I need to know about the music that I'm starting to write." I have been asked more than a few times if my practice is lucid dreaming. As I understand it, lucid dreaming is the capacity to control or direct the movement of a deep dream. My work with inner travel and dreaming is not like this. It is not controlling, but allowing. It is being fully present with an inner experience, a feeling, thought, musical idea, meditation image, dream memory, etc. Allowing, following, accepting, but not controlling or judging. This is not loss of control, but rather partnership. The heart of music appears on its own terms and in its own time. There is what I think I want the music to do, and there is what the music wants to do. The heart cannot be commanded, cannot be arrived at purely by intellectual choice. It is not passive waiting for inspiration. Quite the contrary, the work is regular and purposeful. Dad's daily routine formed the structure for his work. Every morning, he would play a Bach 4-part chorale. He would play the chorale on the piano and sing through each line in turn: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. Bach chorales are Western music in miniature, tiny jewels of line, harmony, and structure. They became the core of Dad's conception of music, and it is impossible to understand his works without them. The chorale melodies themselves are ancient. They draw their power from centuries of daily use and oral history. The melodies combined with Bach's genius for counterpoint and functional harmony created these astonishing works. They became Dad's sacred text. He composed his own harmonizations of dozens of these melodies, and they formed the basis for much of his music. The next part of his day was free improvisation. He would play with ideas and see how they felt. He would sketch freely in a kind of shorthand. He'd write notes on the back of receipts. He'd write little comments to himself. This is a sweet one. This is a good second theme for him for world peace. Still nice 3 months later. He made great stacks. One stack in particular would become very important to me, but we'll talk about that in a second. The ideas in these sketches became the seeds from which he built new works. As he walked and meditated, certain ideas would come to mind, and they would recommend themselves to his mind. He would focus on ideas and feel what they needed to do and suss out their true power. He followed the truth of the idea's heart center wherever it led without fear. Then he would feel how the ideas work together and build the piece. Ideas would expand to reach their true potential. An idea might turn out to not fit properly. As he worked with ideas, the shape of the piece would emerge. Once he was happy with the shape, he would make what is called a fair copy from the rough sketches. This meant finalizing all the details, tempos, transitions, writing out vague gestures. The fair copy is the near final shape of the piece. The next step is orchestration. Orchestration involves aligning elements of the music to different instruments. The color and the texture of the piece is determined by how the instruments are combined. The composition, now finished, goes to the copyist, who makes the final conductor score. Once the score is approved, individual parts are made, sent out to the performers. To recap, meditate, sketch, fair copy, orchestrate, engrave. I did that last part. Dad only ever used the following tools: a William Canapa and Company grand piano, a 0.9 millimeter mechanical pencil with soft lead, 18-inch metal ruler and eraser, 28-line 11 by 17-inch staff paper, 14-line 11 by 8.5-inch staff paper, Aztec brand, Matrix MR500 metronome, and everything else was in his head. No computer, no playback, just pencil and paper. Dad would usually come in for a group's last few rehearsals to work on a new piece. The piece would be premiered. And recorded. From 1968 to 2017, Dad wrote roughly 150 works, about 50 of which were for wind band. He was instrumental in elevating the band to a position of recognized artistic excellence. His major works are pillars in the canon of wind literature: A Child's Garden of Dreams, Symphonies No. 2 and 4, The Mass, Give Us This Day, Liberation, among many others. So, no pressure. Dad had been very important to the symphony. The first movement was done, no problem. Second movement was about half orchestrated, but the rest of the movement had a clear, fair copy. All I had to do was orchestrate the rest of it. Fine. The fourth movement had a pretty solid fair copy. All that was needed was a little interpretation and orchestration. Okay, I got this, no problem. The third movement, well, that was a different story. Dad left about 90 bars of vague copy and some rough sketches. The movement would eventually be about 15 minutes long and 293 bars. You may be surprised where I started. He left 8 pages. There was an opening chorale, a first theme, a development, and a breakdown. Large parts of the sketch were crossed out, as you can see. He wrote in signposts where he crossed out material to let me know where to go. Page 2. Dad had sketched a lot of material in the open staves, but much of it was too fragmentary for me to even get a good sense of what he might have intended. 3 items stood out, though. First, the word recap after the first theme. Recap. Second, the word end. This seemed like it might be an end. But most importantly, a tenor theme leading to a melody labeled "The Song at the Heart of It All." This seemed important. I overheard Dad talking to Mom about a week before she died. He was very happy. He had been wrestling with this third movement for a long time, and he had finally cracked it. I believe he was referring to this melody. I'll play it for you now. So, I had a beginning. I had a chorale, first theme, development, a breakdown. I had an idea that there should be a recap, but no idea what specifically he might have wanted to recap. I had a sense of what the ending material might be, and I had a theme that was vitally important. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, does it? So my first step was to make my own fair copy of Dad's sketch. I made a 2-staff PDF template and wrote on it using an iPad Pro and an Apple using a PDF Expert app. My handwriting isn't as good as his, but I got the job done. Again, so much of his writing was about direct mind to pencil. Alive. I rendered his squiggles into notes. You can see there, we got and I had to decide what that was supposed to be. I made a clearer copy of the confusing figures. So he went, we need a couple extra beats in there. Okay, well, let's write that out. I sketched out several treatments of the tenor melody and the Song of the Heart. And I got to the end of what I could do, and I realized there really wasn't enough there. There was barely any information about the Song of the Heart of it all. And if I wanted to finish this piece, I would have had to write most of it myself. I had just started to say, all right, let's go do that. And then I recognized a chorale melody on top of a stack of paper. This had been staring me in the face the whole time. I'd avoid touching much in Dad's studio. I wanted to leave the space as pristine as possible before we archived everything. So these turned out to be Dad's rough sketches for the third movement, especially the part that I needed to know most about. All told, there are 15 pages in the stack, many with only a brief idea on them, but 2 pages held a nearly worked out section of music that directly incorporated the song. I ended up using a substantial section of these pages. There was even a stunning block chord climax. And when you hear this tonight, if it doesn't knock your socks off, I will give you your money back. There's a little phrase, a quiet recap, and this haunting rising bass line. All the pieces seemed to drop in place at once. In a matter of a few days, I was able to put together the shape and character of the movement. Here's how it shook out. This movement is best described through its basic emotions. There's triumph, rage, grimness, love, and tranquility. The tranquility of the chorale at the beginning gives way to a triumphant first theme. The development is a grim driving force toward the rage of the breakdown. The crash at the end of the breakdown is absorbed by the return of the development. The abrupt shift in tone that marks the beginning of the second theme moves from a pastoral scene to an urgency to fury, ultimately arriving at the triumphant Song of the Heart in the full wind ensemble. The overpowering climax draws down its power through the low rising line, leading to a restatement of the Song of the Heart in the euphonium. This statement, what I just played for you, is the true voice of my Father sung in my own voice. That is my love for my Father. The ringing first theme returns and closes with a thundering finality. The ending is a brief and gentle one. That almost looks like a subway station, doesn't it? Takes you on a trip. I was really proud of myself. I had made a really satisfying, powerful work that honored my Father's spirit in writing, and I forged ahead and I orchestrated the movement. Once orchestrated, I sent it to a composer friend to ask his advice. He asked one question: what does the recap mean to you? This was surprisingly hard to answer. What I finally realized was this: I had fought through all of this to get to the Song of the Heart, my Father's song sung in my voice. This was a huge moment of vulnerability. I needed to put the armor back on, needed to pull the blanket back over my head. The loud, triumphant recap shouted that the world was back to normal, that everything would be okay. But everything was not okay. My father was dead. My mother was dead. I was hurting worse than I ever had. The music that served to pacify now needed to express my grief and loss. I made the recap become gradually wrong. I bent it toward a scream of anguish and pain. The euphonium remains after the ensemble finishes, an unanswered keening hanging in the air. This was a terrifying thing to do, not to mention risky. I had a completed movement, ready to ship off. I was already pushing the deadline to get materials ready for performance. I took a giant sledgehammer to a pristine and beautiful thing. What happened was kind of curious. I'd been focused so hard on the third movement that I'd lost sight of its place in the larger work. The three other movements had very similar dynamic profiles: soft beginnings, louder music in the middle, and soft endings. My third movement was quite loud for most of its duration and ended with a crashing finality. This made the fourth movement like it didn't matter. It's like we're done. We're super done. What are you going to do? We're going to play some more? Okay. But by changing the ending, it became far less final. More than that, the fourth movement was not only restored, but became a soothing balm on the third movement's raw wound. I'm very proud of the third movement. It's a combination of Dad's ideas, my understanding of him and his music, and my reaction to the loss of my mother and father. Completing Symphony number 10 was the hardest thing I've ever done. Full stop. It pushed me to my emotional and intellectual limits. It required me to use everything I ever learned about music, myself, about my dad. What I've written is not how he would have finished a piece, but it is a joining of our two hearts. I miss my dad. He was my closest friend. We could understand each other in a way that no one else could. He has left an indelible mark on all who worked on him or played his music. His works have transformed generations of musicians. His music now lives in us. I want to offer my deepest thanks to Scott and Miroslava Hagen, Steve Steele, and Ansby Rose, for their incredible efforts to make this day possible. Thank you all for coming.